Um, so I know Ashley and Marissa, you both mentioned not really thinking about your racial identity a ton until after college, and I'm the same way. So but for everybody, what is like a resource, so maybe a book or a pastor you've listened to, or what has helped you understand your own racial identity and the idea of biblical justice and how we should be engaging in that in our society?
I think a resource I would recommend is Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together at the Cafeteria? I don't know if I butchered that, but by Beverly Tatum, right? That's who
Mhm.
wrote it. Um, and I think just reading that and seeing and understanding that like I do live in a racialized society, and then I think understanding like just how early on we learn and are molded by like the concepts of race, and just how that social construct is just so implemented and ingrained in us. I think even being a new parent now, just like navigating that. But yeah, I think that is definitely a book I would recommend reading. It's really thick, but I find it to be an easier read. And then I think specifically for an Asian American experience, Someday is Here is a podcast, and um, I've really benefited from leaning on other Asian American women sharing their stories. And I think the Asian American Christian Collaborative has done an excellent job, in my opinion, of coming alongside other minority groups while also creating space for our voices to feel heard. And so I think those are maybe three resources that I would engage over. I don't want to overwhelm, but yeah, those are a couple that I would recommend.
I think another one that has been helpful is Free at Last, The Gospel in the African American Experience by Carl Ellis Jr. And I think it'll take some time to get through. So, but I think it's worth it because it walks through some of the history of the gospel, and all the way starting with like slavery and walking through to present day, and just giving a lot of history. I think sometimes we forget that history is so important and we don't know where to start because I'm not great. I'm not a history buff. So I think that book just kind of is a cheat sheet and just helps you to kind of see where the gospel, where racism, where all these different things kind of play out in the timeline of history, and how people have responded over the years, where some of these things that are embedded in our culture, where they come from. And it's just a really good book, and I think it gives a lot of information. And I think it's just a good place to start when you're trying to figure out like where to start. And so that's Free at Last by Carl Ellis Jr.
Um, yeah, I'm thinking of if you are a reader of fiction. I studied English, and so um, reading even just classic books like To Kill a Mockingbird, those things are so helpful. So yeah, I would recommend, yeah, To Kill a Mockingbird. Just even, I mean, it's just a good classic book to read if you want to be kind of a worldly wise or a well-read, person. But I think it really it just tells a story. So having a narrative sometimes can be helpful to start out. Um, yeah, I'll stop there. I agree with the resources that have already been shared too. So.
I'm going to throw one out too. Even what Grace was saying about history. Actually, I think I heard about this book from Tara after she read it, but The Warmth of Other Suns. It's a really big book. It took me a year to read it because I had a little baby, but it took me a whole year, which shows you how good it is too, because I didn't give up. It took me a year and I just kept going with it, but it's just such good but sad history. It's very personal, very, it just gives you such a great picture. I think in our society when we hear get over slavery, it ended so long ago. This book helps you understand it did not end that long ago. There's a lot more going on afterward that was probably just kind of glossed over in your history class, but was just basically a continuation of that. And so it's a really good book. The Warmth of Other Suns. It's really good.
And I just wanted to add, I know I added, a book that is written by not a non or someone in the majority culture, but I think just in general, like taking in media or like podcasts and things like that, from minority voices is so key, so helpful. When you learn about the minority experience from a minority, it's enriching and it's powerful and it's helpful, and it's hard to be kind of defensive in some of those when you're taking in media that way. So
And I would add with that, I don't think it needs to be a Christian. Like, you should listen to non-Christians who are people of color also. There might be clearly theological and biblical things we would disagree on, but they're still experts in being people of color, so you can learn something from them. But I want to ask a few questions, because I love that with technology, we're able to have diversity within our diversity panel that we wouldn't have if this was just us in CO Columbus. And so even when we have this conversation in race, there's a lot of different aspects in that. And so I wanted to ask a couple of specific questions to some people. So for Marissa and Abigail, I wanted to ask you guys, being women of color, but not African American, a lot of time this conversation is focused on Black and white, and we know that there's a lot of history and there's a lot of reason and there's a lot of work to do there. But if you guys could just speak into, how does that make you guys feel, or where do you find your voice in the conversation being women of color but not African American?
So my parents are from Mexico. I'm Mexican American. And I mean, I think for me, I just find sometimes just being confused on where my place is in this conversation. So for me, it makes sense that this is a Black and white issue, because it's been a long history of that specifically. So I think when things like this happen, there's a combination of should I speak into the Black issues, because there are some things that I can relate to, right? And then there's a lot that I can't. So I think this week has been good as far as recognizing that there, as a minority, there are some general things that we can for sure relate to. But I think a lot of my place is still of learning and listening, and just as my white brothers and sisters are doing. So yeah, I think I still feel confused, though, even at that, just where my place is in this.
I can definitely resonate with what Abby said. I think being Asian American, Filipino American, and then also like not processing a lot of these things till later on in life, I think I felt like my voice or my experiences were invalid, because oh, well, this has been going on for so long and I'm just now entering into the conversation. And I think at first, I remember my first Ethnic Diversity Summit, which is a conference that we have with CO at large, but it's for minority staff. When we were there, I remember just being so confused because the conversation was just black and white. And so I was like, well, how do I fit into this? I don't even really know myself. Like, I was a little confused. And so I think I've been so thankful for African American women on staff championing my voice and like encouraging me to, because they were saying we need to hear your voice. And I think just seeing that and like feeling empowered in that way and spurred me on to want to investigate that more deeply. But I think something that feels off-putting to me. And I want to give the disclaimer that I 100% agree with the fact that there needs to be a black and white conversation. Like, given our nation's history, given, you know, how we were founded, given just the oppression over the years, hundreds and hundreds of years, you know, it's just, it is very evident that this is something, even with current day issues that we're seeing, that it needs to be addressed. And so with anything I'm about to say, I agree with that. But I think sometimes I've felt silenced or dismissed and overlooked when I bring up something from my experience and I'm told, well, the black and white conversation needs to happen first. And I understand, like, I 100% understand that needs to happen. But I also think there's a difference in strategy versus a difference in what's biblical. And so there's not one ethnicity that is elevated in scripture. Like, God is actually a God of diversity and seeing unity within that diversity. And so I think in Ephesians, when he talks about his manifold wisdom is revealed through Jesus, manifold meaning multifaceted or multicolored. We don't see just one color represented. And so I think having, you know, a Mexican American experience, having a Filipino American, having an African American, like all those experiences display the manifold wisdom of God. And so I think it would be wrong for us to not. This is where I'm seeing my place fitting into the conversation. Like, I think it'd be wrong for us not to engage over other experiences, like to just focus. I think where I've felt a lot of harm, even on my own region and on our team, is just there's just one focus on the African American experience. But I'm not going to read the whole quote because I'll just give you the really chopped up, summed up version, my version. But there's a quote that I heard recently, and it talked about how basically just white supremacy is a beast, and in order to fully dismantle it, we need to see how it manifests itself in all these other ethnic groups, like not just in African American. Like, that is definitely one way and a huge way of dismantling it, but it's also prevalent in the Asian American communities, the Mexican American, you know, like you go on and you look at other ethnicities and ethnic groups and how we are all under, you know, oppression. And I'm sure there's varying degrees, you know, I will, you know, agree with that. But I think I stand on the side of, I think there needs to be times where the conversation's diffused a little bit. Mm-hmm. Dr. Soong Chin Ra said that at an ethnic diversity summit one time, but just diffusing the conversation a little bit to hear other experiences. But yes, the black and white conversation should and needs to happen in light of everything going on. Like everything with George Floyd, like it would be wrong for me to still just sit here and be like, well, you need to hear my voice. Like, I'm going to stand in solidarity with my African American brothers and sisters who are hurting right now and lament and speak out with them. So I think there's a tension there as a person of color who isn't African American, but I think it starts with knowing yourself, like learning as you develop your racial identity. Sorry, you can tell I'm really passionate about this because I'm really going off for a while, but I think just, yeah, knowing yourself, you can't participate in that conversation if you don't understand what your role is in the conversation. So I think that would be my really long answer to that question.
Yeah. I feel like that resonates with me too, even what you're saying of not really focusing on your racial identity until after college almost makes you feel somewhat discredited. And I feel the same way. Like, I think being half white, half black, sometimes I'm like, when I say things, even sometimes when I say I'm black, I feel like someone's going to call me out and say, no, you're not. You know what I mean? Or because I haven't been talking about this or have been embarrassed to be African American when I was younger, honestly, I feel like I shouldn't be saying those kind of things. I shouldn't be in this conversation. So I think even when we do hear from everybody, that creates more unity. You know what I mean? Like you just said, we have two different experiences, but you just said something that I said, and I can say I feel the exact same way. And so I think that it does widen the conversation and create more unity. So I love what you said. For you, Tara, so part of the privilege of being white is you don't have to talk about race. You don't have to think about race if you don't want to. So for you, what kind of sparked an interest in racial issues and learning about it and having conversations? Yeah, what kind of sparked that for you, and what has that looked like a little bit for you?
Um, I, when I was in college, I went on a urban ministry kind of summer project. That was, I don't know, 18 years ago. And I felt like I learned a lot there, and it changed even some of the classes that I came back to campus, wanting to do. But then I made the mistake of thinking, well, if you do urban ministry or you teach in a diverse school, you should learn about this stuff. And then I didn't pursue that. I married a campus minister, and I quit learning. I quit actively engaging. I didn't connect that context to like the larger call as a Christian to understand these things. I had a very compartmentalized understanding of some of those topics and what they, how they connected with my faith. And so, honestly, there were probably a lot of years where I wasn't actively learning until I started learning more about the damage that the ministry that I'm trying to, fuel and partner with is not helping students, like some of the things that you've shared. And so I think there's been a renewed conviction or interest that I need to keep learning, and I'm going to always need to keep learning, whether my husband's in campus ministry or no matter what I do, because it's just part of walking with God and loving my neighbor and growing.
And then for you, Grace, so being an African-American woman, but your parents, sorry, I don't want to say this wrong. Where are your parents from?
So yeah, I'm Nigerian American, so my parents are from Nigeria.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make sure. But so since you are an African-American woman, but your ancestors don't have the atrocity of slavery, so just a different experience. Do you see, does that, I don't know, how do I want to say this? Not that I think it changes your voice. Like, do you see that affecting where you feel like your voice is in this conversation, or how other people perceive your voice, or how you feel in that? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand your question.
Okay.
I think as a Nigerian American, so you're right, my parents, my grandmother, grandfather, great, ancestors, slavery is not a part of my heritage, not a part of what my history is specifically. And I remember getting into conversations with friends. I remember getting into conversation with friends when I was in college about this very topic. And so I think it's twofold for me. In one sense, I feel like just because I'm Black. So when I walk outside, no one sees a Nigerian American. They see a Black woman. And so the racism, the prejudice that seems to be the norm for Black people in America is what I experienced my whole life, because I was born and raised in America. But I would say on the other side of that, when when people find out that I'm Nigerian American, or Black people mainly, that's when the question starts. Like, do you really feel like you're part of the movement? Do you really feel like this, that, and the other? And my answer is always yes, because it's like, man, I understand that our histories are different, but my present day is the same. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I can't fully understand some of the pain of hearing your grandmother talk about, what it was like to grow up in Jim Crow, or, things of that nature. And I get that and understand. And I would never want to, try and take away from someone's experience. But I think my voice comes from the fact that, I experience the same kind of, thing that a regular African American would experience, day to day. And so for me, I don't think that, affects my voice that much. I don't think people really perceive like me being Nigerian American as that much different from being just African American in general. But I think it just gives me a different perspective, which I've been grateful for, and even a different community to continue to try and, bridge some gaps, I guess. But no, I think that just being Black has continued to, allow me to have confidence in my voice in this, conversation.
That's great. Thank you.